With the Panama Canal expansion and be able to accommodate larger vessels from the current lock and dam that accommodates vessels that are 965 feet long, that have a draft of 39.5 feet, that's the amount that the vessel's sitting underwater, and it's just about 1,000 feet long, that in the new set of locks that will open April 2016, according to the Panama Canal Authority, that you're going to get a vessel that's, instead of 965 feet long, it'll be about 1,200 feet long. Instead of a draft of 39.5 feet, they'll have a draft of 50 feet available to them. And then the width of the ship, instead of 110 feet beam or width, they're going to have 180 feet. And what that means is that you're able to put more commodities on that vessel to go through this new set of locks that's going to be able to allow for lower transportation costs overall. And with lower transportation costs, then you're able to expand the reach of the Mississippi River system to more farmers, more farmland. Today, the Mississippi River has a draw area of, say, 70 miles. So farmers can go up to 70 miles, farmers from 70 miles out can go to the Mississippi River and be fairly competitive to go and put it on a barge rather than go to a train shuttle loader and move it through the Pacific Northwest. With the Panama Canal, farmers that are beyond 70 feet, those who are, say, 110 miles away, will be able to participate in loading Panamax ships to their fullest abilities using the new set of locks. Today, a Panamax vessel that goes to the Panama Canal can be loaded up to about 57,000 tons of soybeans. Once the new lock is open, the new set of locks are open, and we load a Panamax ship to its fullest abilities of the draft that's available on the lower Mississippi, they'll be able to load another 7,000 to 10,000 tons of cargo. And what that means, the cost overall falls substantially, that the draw area for the Mississippi River, and therefore the Center Gulf export corridor, now goes out to 110 miles. If you're able to take a larger vessel, say a small Cape or what they're calling a Neo-Panamax ship, and load it with 84,000 tons of soybeans, you're looking at a draw area of now 150 to 160 miles. So now farmers are seeing that they've got options to go to the Mississippi River or to take advantage of the railroads at shuttle train loading facilities. And those who are further away from the river get to enjoy now of some of the benefits that the Panama Canal expansion could bring back to the Mississippi River system. For international buyers, what I like for them to see is that when they see the Panama Canal expansion completed and vessels are flowing through there, that there is now a greater opportunity for lower transportation costs out of the United States. We would believe that with the Panama Canal being able to lower the transportation cost overall conceivably, because of the greater volume on a vessel going the same distance, that they're able to see that greater lowering cost of inland transport costs overall across the system. That conceivably the railroads would have to see their freight rates be more competitive. So that would mean even the Pacific Northwest would have to be a little bit more competitive with the Center Gulf. At the end of the day, though, we would believe that the Center Gulf is going to offer more competitive opportunities. And so for the international carrier, with the Panama Canal expansion, we have seen the major grain export elevators expanding their operations to accommodate higher volumes, higher speed, higher throughput. In the future, we're going to have to feed not just 7 billion people, we're going to have to feed 9 billion people. And in the United States, we believe at Inform Economics that the grain export program and the product export program is going to achieve new records starting in the next 2 to 3 years and keep growing beyond there. And we need a better infrastructure system. Just one Panama Canal, 100 miles or 161 kilometers, is going to make an impact. What we have seen in the United States on the U.S. East Coast, for example, ports up and down from Maine to Florida, all the way over to Texas, they have been deepening their terminals and their shipping navigation channels to accommodate larger vessels to be able to go through the Panama Canal. So what this message is that when infrastructure comes together, it is very meaningful, and the shipping community takes advantage of it real quick. At Inform Economics, we have prepared studies for the U.S. Soybean Board, United Soybean Export Council, and for the Soybean Transportation Coalition, looking at transportation and infrastructure and what it means to both the farmers and what it means to the global market to be able to have an efficient system. At the same time, we're able to look at what are some of the deficiencies that we need to address. And so for the buyer, they need to understand that sometimes the baby's ugly, and we need to help them understand, but there's ways to accommodate that. In the United States, we have alternative routings, and so certainly the Center Gulf, taking advantage of the U.S. Panama Canal is going to be important. But we have infrastructure improvements that took place in the Columbia River. In 2011, the United States completed the dredging of the Columbia River from 40 feet to 43 feet, and immediately we saw vessels being loaded with heavier volumes and took advantage of that draft, and they've sustained those levels. The message there is that when we improve infrastructure, the market responds to it. The Panama Canal is going to impact a number of commodities, products, and different types of services globally, quite frankly. One of the things that it has done is led to competitors to expand their own infrastructures. For example, the Suez Canal recently completed an expansion of their very own in response to higher trade volumes of more ships transiting through the Suez Canal, but also because the Panama Canal was going to become more competitive. So infrastructure projects are not done in isolation. The world watches. So we see that there's going to be a response, there's going to be competitiveness for the movement of commodities around the world. For U.S. agriculture, we see that there's going to be more volume available to be able to take advantage of the deeper draft. At the same time, we see in terms of coal, automobiles, perhaps liquid natural gas, perhaps even one day oil exports, crude oil exports that could take advantage of a larger Panama Canal expansion. So it's not just grain. It's also looking at container vessels that could come through the Panama Canal. What that does is open up more logistics options, expands the supply chain opportunities for a variety of commodities and products to move both ways through the canal, going from the U.S. Gulf through the Panama Canal, and likewise coming to the U.S. Gulf or to the U.S. East Coast to bring those cargoes and commodities into the United States. So that gives greater opportunities and not as beholden to either just a U.S. West Coast option or a long move through the Suez Canal or around the Cape of Good Hope to come to the Center Gulf or the Atlantic ports, where now we have these options available that are more expansive, and it starts to create this opportunity for people to consider alternative modal options, whether it is more container vessels in the Center Gulf that come into New Orleans, Port of Houston, Port of Mobile. Maybe one day we could see a strong container armed barge program such as we see in Europe, and we're seeing that discussion being promulgated more and more. Ports in Miami, Jacksonville, Savannah, going up into Norfolk and New York, New Jersey, they are preparing themselves. Miami has finished its program for deeper draft. We're seeing it. Savannah is getting underway, and as we go up into New York, New Jersey, they're spending billions to raise bridges, deepen the navigation channels, and bring in larger container handling equipment to accommodate larger vessels and more volumes. Meanwhile, if we look at the inland river ports, we have seen a renaissance of new barge loading facilities at ports up and down the Mississippi River system. And in fact, there's a brand new port that we have been involved with as an interim port director at the Port of Kate's Landing at River Mile 900 on the Mississippi River that has been built, that has received Tiger funding, and that the U.S. has invested in its infrastructure, as has the state of Tennessee. And they're seeing that there's interest of people wanting to build facilities to take advantage of these new infrastructure projects that have emerged to be able to serve an economy that wants to grow and wants to prosper and really something for the future. Meanwhile, what we've seen with the railroads, especially the eastern railroads, they have really improved their infrastructure with removing impediments that impacted double-stack container service, where they stack two containers on top of each other to move by rail. For many of their tunnels, they were limited to single-stack service. Well, now they've fixed those, and they've expanded their container yards, and now they're able to reach into this heartland of the United States with the ports to accommodate this higher anticipated level of container trade that's going to take place here in the United States. And at the end of the day, the West Coast ports have not been sitting idly by either, because they recognize that, you know, as you see improvements elsewhere, they need to do some things. And you've seen the formation of the ports of Seattle and Tacoma come together under a Northwest Seaport Alliance. And that's part of an ability to join forces, but to also be competitive in that marketplace, that when we look at transportation infrastructure projects that come together, it does necessitate that people respond to that. And we have seen the ports in the United States do that. The flip side of that is that in our infrastructure in the United States, we have challenges. Our very own locks and dams are not getting the same attention, the same type of devotion as the Panama Canal. And so they're falling further behind. Certainly we've got different legislation that the soybean community has supported very much in the front of with everyone else. But we're just not seeing that appropriations come through to really keep our system functioning. Right now, if you look at the state of Illinois, the locks and dams around that state, well over $500 million of deferred maintenance is sitting out there today, falling further and further behind. And that's before we get to the need for new construction and major modernization of our locks and dams on the river system. Without those locks and dams, any kind of failure will just stop trade. We're moving more cargo in the United States than we've ever moved in history. And we need a well-functioning infrastructure. We're the envy of the world. And if we don't keep up with the expansion of a new inland infrastructure in Brazil, South America, our competitive advantage that we have with inland transportation begins to erode. And all the benefits of a Panama Canal expansion start to fade away. And so that's very important from a message standpoint, how we get the attention for the policymakers and those who are financing these projects to stay focused on what the future looks like. The Panama Canal was not built for tomorrow and to be at capacity on the first day it opens. It was built for tomorrows. And we should be looking at the very same thing. We've really exhausted our infrastructure. It's time to really take a look at our infrastructure and take it beyond the wrinkles and now the hip replacement, knee replacements we're kind of going through. And how do we bring it in place to be that support competitive business, competitive trade around the world?